It's
Hey, good morning, everyone. This is the task force of the Socwed. It is Tuesday, August 20th, 2024 at 9:05 in the morning. We're here to begin our continued discussions on the executive director. And so before we get started, we'll have introductions. And so I'm Representative Michael Marcotte from Coventry. I chair House Commerce and Economic Development, and I also chair this task force.
and we are classmates. I was thinking about that as I drove up. Mike and I are classmates. Some of the two left. 2000 from the 2004 class. I'm Allison Clarkson. I am the vice chair of Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. I am also serve on government operations in the Senate, and I'm also the majority leader in the Senate. I pass it to Mike.
Good morning, everyone. Michael Harrington. I'm the commissioner for the Vermont Department of Labor.
So there's three of us this morning of the five.
Should we have our guests, given how few of us? Should we have our guests
We will when I finish.
Okay, sorry.
Kendall Smith from the governor's office will be joining us around 10 o'clock. The previous engagement, which you can make here at 9. And right now, we currently do not have a chair of the State Workforce Development Board, who is the 5th member of this task force, who will be updated from the commissioner shortly on how all of that's going also. So with that, Rick, we have our legal counsel with us this morning.
Yeah, so Rick Segal, Office of Legislative Counsel and Workforce Development is in my portfolio. So I'm here to support the Socwed group.
Thank you. And we also have members of the public that have joined us. Adam, he's the former executive of the former chair of the State Workforce Development Board, which they went away July 1st because of this legislation, but he continues to work with us, and we certainly appreciate his time and his continued efforts to help us get to where we need to be.
Great. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Good to see you.
Ellen Taylor, Deputy Director of the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund and former member of the State Workforce Development Board.
Oh, I forgot to mention that.
Megan.
Megan Canella, Committee Assistant.
Thank you. So that's everyone that has joined us so far this morning. We don't have anyone else online.
No.
Okay. So I'll turn it over to Commissioner Harrington, and we can talk about the executive director qualifications that we worked on at our last meeting, as well as updates to what's going on with the State Workforce Development Board and how that's proceeding of being reorganized.
Yeah, that's interesting to know.
Just logging in here and getting on the meeting so I can eventually share my screen when we get there. But otherwise, to give an update. So as of, I believe, July 1st, as Mr. Chair said, the current board or the board at the time would cease to exist. And so we're going through the reappointment process, identifying members. And there was a matrix that is in the legislation that shares the various seats. So right now, the big ones that have to be determined and then appointed are, there's a section for workforce partners that we need on the board, and then a section for employers or businesses. And a majority of the board has to be constructed of businesses. So we've identified a preliminary list of names and provided those to the governor's office. And Kendall may be able to give more when she gets here about where that process is at. I think we've done some additional work on identifying a potential chair and are moving through that process. Kendall's been handling that aspect. And then the other piece that's still out there, obviously, is the appointment of an executive director and then the hiring of the staff person that goes along with the office. So we're moving along. I think the one area where it articulated, I think, in the legislation that we were technically supposed to have a chair appointed by the 1st of August. I know that didn't actually happen, but we are in conversations with somebody who may be interested in serving as a chair. They were out of the state, out of the country, I believe, for a couple of weeks. So that has just slowed us down in having those conversations with them.
May I ask what your priorities have been and what's sort of the screen of priorities that you've applied in looking at a new chair?
You'd have to talk to Kendall about that because they've, out of the governor's office, identified somebody that they felt would be a good chair. So I haven't had any conversations yet with them. I do know I know who the person is. Again, we haven't necessarily solidified that, nor I think have they formally agreed to do it, but they were interested in learning more about the role of chair. It needs to be a member of the business community. It's somebody who has a significant business in Vermont, and they are in a senior leadership position within that company. So, again, I think identifying, scary thought, but if I put my Kendall hat on, looking at those employers that have been actively engaged with us on, or are challenged by the workforce struggles that we face in Vermont, and identifying employers that have been active, either vocally or physically active in working on the governor's priorities. So,
And the term is for how long? I forgot.
I'd have to look because it's one thing we did in the legislation is we staggered the terms.
Yes,
So my
which is good.
guess is probably 2 years, but I'd have to look
For the chair,
for the chair.
I don't believe we had dictated the chair's term. Other governor and the governor gets to choose which appointees serve which of the staggered terms, but the chair was not given a specific amount of time.
And Adam, how long have you served as chair? You,
I believe it was 2017,
yeah, because you've been chair a while.
Yeah,
That's
it was
right.
Frank
might have been
Coffey.
18.
Yeah, Frank was my first chair when I was. Great. And in a rare move, I will point out that the legislature appointed its members before anybody else. You and me. I think.
To the state workforce,
Yeah.
I've not been appointed.
I
to the
think
state
I
workforce
have. I think the Senate has.
I'm not aware.
Well, maybe I'm wrong. We'll double check
I think.
before I crow. Okay, I'm not gonna crow yet. Because I was thinking, oh, this is so rare.
Yes, share the good news, right? Take every win you can get.
Yeah.
Our hope, I think, would be that in the next so that individual that was traveling is back this week. I believe they wanted to connect with Gus and Jay, who have both been intimately involved with the board in different roles, to get a flavor of kind of how the board has acted in the past, but also what the future vision is. And we also have been compiling a list of potential representatives to fill those other partner seats.
Okay, I think, I do want to bring everyone's attention to, when you look at our documents and handouts in our webpage, Wednesday, August 14th, David Justice had sent us a memo. He's with the Adult Education Literacy Network, and with a real interest in being part of that board.
Yeah.
So that's still up to the administration on who they choose, but that's there. Whether or not they're chosen or not, I think it's still someone that the board may want to reach out to be part of subcommittees if they're not chosen to be on the board. So
yeah, so I think you bring up a good point, because it actually, as I was talking before we went live, the department's going through its 4-year review of its various programs by the U.S. Department of Labor, and one of those is looking at with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, various programs that we run, but includes an active state workforce board and various components of that. So part of the conversation yesterday was just the fact that, if the ultimate goal is to keep the board at a reasonable size for voting members, there's always the opportunity to include more in the regular meetings and subcommittees.
Yeah, it's a good one though, adult, because they're such important partners on the workforce.
Yep.
I was just, to that point, I was just at a very exciting workforce training, 3-week training that they did at the Hartford area Career and Technical Education Center on energy sector jobs, on weatherization, heat pump installation, insulation installation. And I got to see that in the last week, I got to go and spend some time with them. And and they had 10 students, 3 women, 7 men, I think. And it was very exciting to see people very excited about pivoting to a new career, to a new opportunity, to earning more money, to doing something that was helping the world. It was just great. And that was all through our partners with adult education.
Good.
Yeah, that was great.
So I'm happy to at least kick off just walking through the documents we have.
Yes. The document we worked on.
Yeah, so the first one was from the working group. The final version was developed, and let me share my screen here.
And I can't remember the date on this because I had my last notes on the note one before that I had as 7/19, but we had changed some things I see that are incorporated in this last one, and I just can't remember what date that was because there's no date on this.
Yeah, I can.
I know you have draft 3.3, which is good. Draft version 1.
So the last edits that were made on 3.3, I think were
Yep.
around July 19th,
Yeah, I
maybe.
think that
Yeah.
was our last meeting. wasn't it?
Yep, it was.
So my screen is, I think, being shared. So we had come to an agreement on the qualifications, I think relatively pretty easily with some minor adjustments. So vision, leadership, strategic direction, collaboration and partnership building, policy development and implementation, board governance and stakeholder management, communications and public relations, project management, and prior experience. And then we moved into the responsibilities, and I think the committee felt, rightfully so, that it was good to break those down into what would be the duties and responsibilities of the executive director as it relates to the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development, and then how do they relate to the Workforce Development Board and the work. So we broke those into 2 different categories. There's 12 under the first section, 10 under the other section. The group, I think, unanimously, if I'm remembering correctly, approved these with the idea that we would take them to the Department of Human Resources and have them review them, which we did. We talked to one of their talent acquisition specialists.
Talent acquisition. What a title.
That is the
Humans are
formal
not
title.
acquired any longer, as I recall.
But maybe their talents are.
Well,
So,
that's a tough word, acquired. Acquisition, weird.
so we, it was reviewed. The only comments we got back, so after giving them a little bit of the scope of what we're bringing to them and the legislation that created this and how it moves forward, the only feedback they had was more around how we might frame this document if the governor decided to post it publicly and seek public applications. So they didn't have any technical corrections other than they did suggest under number 8 on the first page.
Your favorite.
So they were fine with the minimum qualification of 5 years. They didn't have a recommended change other than we may want to consider using a different word other than professional in professional experience, because professional they felt could be widely varied in terms of people's definition.
Hmm.
So again, they said for this document, it's fine. When we publish it, is there a different term that's more quantifiable?
It's hard to think of one that's more quantifiable than professional, i.e. paid for your work.
Yeah.
That's all that means, in my opinion.
I think the difference is that it has many different connotations publicly.
Yeah, so you could be a professional in
Anything.
anything.
Yeah.
Is that, are we looking more for professional?
Oh, professional and related experience? So are we looking for a word like related experience?
I think the other thing is, I know there was a lot of conversation about keeping the word in there, but you could just take it out and say a minimum of 5 years prior experience is preferred, right? What's the difference between prior experience and professional experience? Or look at what does the word professional actually add to that sentence, so.
Or prior related experience?
Yeah, we just had used related.
We used related early, at the end
Yeah.
too. As I.
So we could also just change professional to related and then at the end just say or other similar field.
Yeah, I think related experience is important. It isn't just prior experience.
Okay. So I don't have any issue with that.
Yeah.
It also says preferred,
Yeah.
which kind of just minimizes the whole thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to even have to have 5 years. It's just 5 years experience preferred.
Right.
Just putting that out there too.
And they were
Yeah.
comfortable with that. Again, the only other recommendations they had were around how would we wordsmith this in a public posting?
Just to give everyone a heads up, they're getting ready to test the alarm system.
Oh, great.
Just so you have a heads up, there's nothing going on. It's just a test.
But it will make a very loud
It
noise.
probably will.
Maybe we can mute it.
Wish we could.
Do you want to keep going or do we want to pause?
What would you?
Do we have a notion of when the alarm is going to go off? I think we just plow through and pretend it's like any other day when we get an alarm.
We don't have to do evacuate or anything?
No.
Okay.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah. Really.
We picked a good day and time of all the days.
It happens several times a week though, doesn't it? I get the emails. Be testing the alarm today. I'm like,
Again?
yeah,
They
Jeez.
must be doing work on the
yeah,
system.
yeah.
So what do we want to do here? Do we?
I either say related or get rid of it altogether and just say prior experience, but I don't, I'm happy, I just want related either at the end of that
Right.
sentence or prior, I think prior related
So this
experience is
is-
useful.
This comes up, this is what I did just based on our quick conversation. So a minimum of 5 years related experience is preferred, and then at the end, or other similar field.
I think that's good.
Again, we may wordsmith it if we put it out publicly, so this is just a guiding document.
I'm fine with that. So
Yes,
I guess
perfect.
the three of us are good. Then we're good. Okay.
And then let me pull up the other.
And, I think that's quite, to go to your other question, Michael, I think that's what HR does, speaking of professional, that's what they've been in the business of doing, is translating stuff to advertise nationally. They know the markets and where it would be appropriately marketed.
Yeah.
And I think it would be interesting to hear, this is a lot of great information for them to distill, but I would think they could do that. It's easier to edit out than add in, and we've given them a lot to
Yes.
work with.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see if that decision is made, and as you know, I hope it is, just because there are so many great people out there that we just don't know about. And in the effort of bringing more people to Vermont, I think advertising broadly is a good idea. And I just would love to see how they distill it.
Yeah, and certainly I can't speak on behalf of the governor or his team and what they're going to want to do, whether they're going to want to post it publicly or identify someone.
Well, but Kendall's coming, so we can lobby Kendall.
Yeah. The other role, oh, yes, sir.
Just to get back to this document, so I think we can wait for Kendall, but I think we probably should
Prove it.
take a final vote on approving that document with those two changes, so that the draft is gone and now it's an official document that's been adopted by the Socwed.
Okay.
But when Kendall gets here, we'll go back to that.
Right.
Okay.
And this other one. So the other role of the Socwed was to review under Vermont's current statute and the various roles, responsibilities, or authority given to the Department of Labor and the Commissioner as it relates to workforce. And so how do we kind of split the apple there in terms of what functions and authority would fall under the executive director and which would stay with the commissioner. So the first page here.
I think we should have Rick walk us through.
Sure.
This
Yeah, I think that's a great.
540
540.
and then.
I can just keep it up on the screen if you want.
Sure.
This is just a straight copy.
Oh, that's 540.
This is
Okay,
the
great.
Existing statute.
Okay, yeah. Can you all read that okay?
540.
Yeah, we have it here.
Okay.
We have it here in even smaller type.
Well, as
This,
long as you can read
this
it.
is so small. I mean, I don't know. Am I the only person who thinks this is small? I mean, I know I'm the oldest person in the room, but. Okay, I will just put on,
It is small.
Do you want me,
Thank
do you want me to share my screen and have a larger?
I think
Mike,
it's shared right there.
As long as you, yeah, okay.
Can.
Yeah.
Make sure everybody can
expand it a little bit.
No, perfect. Yeah, great.
So one thing before I go over 540 is just to kind of summarize what we're doing here is there was discussion during the session of going ahead and doing this
Right.
work to add a 540 because we did make substantial changes to the state workforce board and the governance system. But you know, at the end of the day, we decided to put this as part of the Socwed work. So really the committee here's duty is to revise 540. That's it. There's not really any other directives regarding 540, but once we read it, you'll see that we're going to have to reconfigure it based on the Act 146 changes. So section 540 was last edited, just a little bit of background, in 2014. There was federal law that updated the state's workforce boards, and Vermont edited it back 10 years ago. So because of that, the 540 was created to give the Commissioner of Labor, the leader of workforce education and training in the state, and shall have the authority and responsibility for the coordination of workforce education and training within state government, including the following duties. So the first part, subdivision 1, is all with the state workforce development board. And this is probably, you know, we have created this executive director that oversees the state workforce board. So you kind of want to think about that. These probably mostly should be thought of as executive director roles, but we can certainly talk about each bullet point here. Advise the governor, perform the following duties in consultation with the state workforce board. Advise the governor on the establishment of an integrated system of workforce education and training.
Just to go back to what you were just saying, Rick, I think that's one of the issues that we have is that under WIOA, the Commissioner of Labor is the workforce development champion for WIOA. So, and that's how we need to figure out how we separate those duties that are required by WIOA for the commissioner to perform. But how do we also integrate that new executive director into State Workforce Development Board, working in conjunction with the commissioner and vice versa? I think it's trying to create something that the executive director and the commissioner have the ability to work together on everything that we're trying to do, not just WIOA.
Because,
But we need to make sure that the commissioner stays in control of this part of of the State Workforce Development Board and WIOA.
Well, the State Workforce Development Board is one, a WIO requirement, right?
Yes, yeah.
So even its existence is required by WIO.
But so we're not making the executive director now the head of the State Workforce Development Board. They'll be there to work with the commissioner and the board on, and utilize the board and the commissioner for other things that are outside of WIO.
And I think that's one of the issues, right, is that the State Workforce Development Board oversees WIO activities, but it's also could be and has been bigger than that.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
And I think in that way, that's going to be a joint management operation.
I think as we go through this, you'll see that we've done some preliminary work separating out and keeping the more state-specific functions with the executive director and the work with the board, and more of the federal oversight, compliance, and some of that authority with the commissioner. So, back to Rick's point, that when this was originally drafted, because the department is the state workforce agency and the commissioner is the state workforce administrator, most of these functions fell under the commissioner. I think a lot has changed since then. So
Yeah.
we have the ability to separate those out.
And also keep in mind, we created this executive committee. So you have the commissioner of labor, you have the executive director, and now you have the executive committee, which, you have these different levels that ideally work together. And I don't know if you want to put that committee somewhere in here. You don't have to, but maybe keep that in mind as well, that they're part of this too.
Right.
Okay, so I believe I was in just part B here. This is in consultation with the State Workforce Development Board. Create and maintain inventory of all existing workforce education and training programs and activities in the state. Use data to ensure the state workforce education and training activities are aligned with the needs of the available workforce, the current and future job opportunities in the state, any specific credentials needed to achieve employment in those jobs.
And so this is probably more for the commissioner, but when we're talking about B and C, are we talking about WIOA centric? Because when we talk about inventorying all existing workforce education training programs, is there anything out there that's
There are lots that aren't WIO related.
right? And so, and I think that's going to be our challenge, is how do we weave those all together to make sure that you're taking care of the activities under WIOA, and that the executive director is also looking at that with the commissioner, but looking at the other things with the commissioner as well.
Yeah.
And the board and the workforce board. Yeah.
And
And it may be when we talk about the duties of the commissioner and state workforce development board, that we might have to write another section that also says this is what the executive director is expected to do, and it may be some of the same thing.
Yeah, and specifically call out WIO related workforce development things that fall under that umbrella versus the things that fall under in-state and out-of-state. Because even not all the state ones are that are in the different departments and agencies, they are not all WIO related, although some are. It's a complex web, which is why we're hoping to have someone to see it and coordinate it all. There's our challenge, is
So
it's big.
Yeah, because we just will keep in mind, and Rick will need you, and Michael yours, and Cameron when he's free, is to how do we then weave those together?
Yeah.
And how do we articulate it in a way that makes everyone comfortable and thoughtfully clarifies each person's responsibility and that's understood both federally and with us, because the feds have an understanding of it. That may be different from it.
I mean, when you read everything that's there,
a lot.
It is, but it's not just WIOA, it's everything.
Yeah.
Within the state that we want everybody working on.
I mean, just the whole data. Every time I see the word data, I think of Alicia. Record.
Yeah, and I've not read the commissioner's proposed separation duties here, but you have tentatively approved the duties and responsibilities of the executive director. And this is going to go, I imagine the commissioner used that as his template for the separation. So you do kind of have a working document to go off of, hypothetically. And D is big, develop a state plan as required by federal law to ensure the workforce education and training programs and activities in the state serve the citizens of business.
Adam?
Oh, Adam, there's Adam's hand. It's so, forgive us, Adam, you're tiny and hard to see.
All good. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to take the opportunity to, underscore what I think everyone in this room at least understands is the importance of communicating to the greater public the role of the executive director. We knew that we really had some work ahead of us to separate what is embedded in what the responsibilities of the commissioner within the DOL, and then what this role would be, and then of course what Jay's current role is. But I think one of the things that both the study and then the committee was really working towards was being able to clearly communicate to stakeholders, constituents, what the role of the executive director is, what their responsibilities are, and who is the go-to person for workforce development. I don't know if this is getting to it. It is it's reflecting the importance and the need for the Commissioner of Labor under the previous statute to be named as the leader of the workforce education and training. So with that in place and that staying, what is the role of the executive director? And I think clearly defining that, as Rick was suggesting, the outline is here, but it's going to be really important to people to be like, who do we call to talk about workforce? Who's in charge of workforce? So I don't think that's yet materialized.
So is that what you've done here, Michael, is done this separation?
Yeah.
This is a draft of the idea. Okay. So we're just overseeing what's existing now and what we're going to pivot to what.
Probably the best thing for us to do is to zip it and let Rick walk through the rest of it.
Exactly.
And then
I was just
we'll
thinking.
go to the commissioner. We'll get into the meat of it.
Great.
Okay. Finishing up the subdivision 1 here, the coordination or consultation with the State Workforce Board. E, ensure coordination and non-duplication of workforce education and training activities. That one's pretty interesting based on what we're working on here.
Yeah.
F, identify best practices and gaps in the delivery of workforce education and training programs. Design and implement criteria and performance measures for workforce education and training activities. Establish goals for the integrated workforce education and training system. With the assistance of the Secretaries of Commerce and Community Development, of Human Services, of Education, of Agriculture, Food and Markets, and of Transportation, and of the Commissioner of Public Safety, develop and implement a coordinated system to recruit, relocate, and train workers to ensure the labor force needs of Vermont's businesses are met. Okay, so now we're into different.
When we're talking on looking at the list of agencies and departments, we haven't, should we be including HR? Because we should be thinking about our own state workforce as well as all other workforce out there. And maybe just having a line that says in other relevant agencies is determined by the Commissioner of Labor, something to that effect. That might be something that we think about when we're drafting whatever language we need to make the changes that we're recommending. Just want to make sure that we have all of the departments and agencies within state government are working with the Department of Labor, State Workforce Development Board in order to,
Yes.
within state government and outside of state government.
Yeah, I don't know why just these few were selected. I think you might.
I don't either, because actually almost every department and agency has some workforce development. Wouldn't you say, Michael?
The only thing I was gonna add is, I think A through H, so a little bit of history and why this is framed the way it is, in 2014, the Workforce Innovation Act became the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act,
Right.
which then necessitated the creation and
Right.
editing of this section. I actually think I was added later. If I remember correctly, I think Sarah Buxton brought that forward in committee because of the recruitment work that was being done. And so I think these were identified as core agencies and departments that were working on out-of-state recruitment. They were working with community members, other local businesses. So I think, you have representation obviously from commerce and community development, human services because of the high recruitment in healthcare, the Agency of Education for its recruitment out of state, agriculture, food and markets, and transportation. Again, because of their draw of pulling professionals into Vermont. And the community, the businesses they work with, right? So construction obviously is a big one, agriculture, food markets.
But I don't think at the time we were thinking of the state government.
Right.
Being one of those major employers.
Correct.
And I think we're seeing, that there's a greater need now than there was.
And just
And in education, I mean, just think of all the things we've made available in terms of growing our educational professionals and trying to grow their
education is
skills and
up there,
talent.
yeah.
Is education there?
Yeah, it's just not listed as the agency of, it says the secretaries of commerce, community development of human services.
There's okay, sorry, yeah. So,
The other piece too is, and I think this is, if we want to have the conversation about human resources, we should just be thinking about it in context of what they actually do. So they do actually very little in terms of the hiring for state government or the recruitment for state government. A lot of that function falls to the individual agencies and departments.
so they do let's say they do the national advertising and then they funnel the candidates.
They have a standard, they have an agreement, I believe, where the state system is scraped by a third party and posted out there, but they don't do massive widespread recruitment or advertising. So it's up to the agencies and departments to determine how they want to advertise. So they will post it on the state system. The state has a third party, I think it's probably like Indeed, that will scrape from the state system and post it on Indeed. But anything beyond that is up to the agency and department to decide, determine, and in some cases pay for. Right. So
then the function of HR then is.
The function is really an administrative one. It's not an actual recruitment and selection.
That's left up to the agency.
Right. So they help us post the requisition. They make sure the job postings and requisitions are in compliance with current state policy around, making sure that they're classified appropriately and articulated with a job specification. They ensure that the posting is published, and then they will essentially, once all the applications are collected, they will do an initial review to make sure all the applicants meet the minimum qualifications for that position. And whoever doesn't goes over here, and whoever does
Get funneled to you.
gets sent right to the
Whoever's
agency or department.
department.
So they're doing very little in terms of the actual recruitment beyond that one piece. So we should just be thinking about how we help agencies and departments in that.
But surely they're the experts in terms of marketing a particular job nationally. If you were going to do it nationally, that they would know the places to do that.
I would
In
say,
addition to.
I would say the agencies and departments know better than the Department of Human Resources on where to.
Yeah, that probably is true.
Only because I'm thinking like in ours,
in the field.
we would know who our national associations are, right? So when we post high-level positions, we'll go to our associations.
Okay. Yeah, but like when we're talking about state employees, we haven't named, yes.
Yeah, well, and maybe we don't name them. There's probably a better way to wordsmith this, so it just.
Yeah, so they.
Guides how.
Because otherwise you're just gonna exclude somebody by mistake.
Yeah.
Okay.
Give a thought.
I can say that, as Commissioner Harrington said, I think that I was a part of a discussion that came from that working group, like 7, 8 years ago. Because there was a feeling that it was only those agencies and departments that had direct WIOA funding that were really being in the loop, and there was a feeling like commerce, ag, they all had a workforce component working with employers. So just as Commissioner Harrington said, the idea was, how do we get across all of the agencies and departments, understanding the workforce needs globally across all sectors? And that was why some of those were in particular, because I know with the Agency of Free Market, they have workforce in their statute, and they were not at that time looped in at all. So that was
Pretty
it.
much we want everybody at the table.
Yes.
Well, and everyone has needs.
All right, shall I continue?
Yeah.
Okay. So subdivision 2. Require from each business, training provider, or program that receives state funding to conduct workforce education and training, a report that evaluates the results of the training. Each recipient shall submit his report on a schedule determined by the commissioner and shall include at least the following information. Pretty standard stuff here: name of the person who receives the funding, amount of the funding, activities and training provided, number of trainees and their general description, employment status of trainees, and future needs for resources.
When we talk about state funding, does that include federal funding that flows through the state?
I think so, if I remember correctly. I think a lot of this has to do with the eligible training provider list, which is those that provide workforce training services in collaboration or conjunction with the Department of Labor. So it would be, for instance, even though it's state funded for our electrical and plumbing apprenticeship program, they are part of the eligible training provider list, which is a WIOA function, and they are required to provide this information. I think, to me, there's a less about like articulating the specific data points, because we can always determine that after the fact, but really thinking about how do you streamline the money that goes out to these organizations, right? Because we have some that receive subawards from like the Department of Labor. We have a number of employment and training grants that we hand out, but some are direct appropriations from the legislature because they want to fund a specific activity.
That's part of our problem and part of why we're here.
Yeah, so I think as we're thinking about the future of this is like, how do we better control where the money gets dispersed from? Because, you know, if it ends up in a subaward from the Department of Labor and we simply become the pass-through, there's an entire grant agreement that they have to agree to meet our compliance, right? So it doesn't all need to be articulated in statute depending on how we administer the funds.
But yes. Right.
Yeah.
To me, one of the most important pieces is to have one place where we know where all the money is going, how are we supporting workforce development in all these different capacities, how are those all coordinated?
Yeah, because not everything flows through the Department of Labor either.
Exactly, not everything.
Right.
So that is why we need somebody, to me, this is one of the key reasons for needing an somebody outside of your department.
And to me, subdivision 3 goes along with subdivision 2, but they're separate. Review reports submitted by each recipient of workforce education and training funding. So yeah, 2 says you require reports, and 3 says you review the reports. Maybe I'm missing something, but that just appears to be a duty on the,
It's like an obvious thing, like,
yeah, but who's gonna review? I guess it'd be the Commissioner of Labor that would review the reports.
Well, and it's funny because.
Currently.
Right, like, all this, I can always say I read the report, right?
Right, I just don't
Actually
understand.
telling me to do anything with the information.
Right, yes, that's why I'm like, this is kind of random. Okay, 4, issue an annual report to the governor, the House Committees on Appropriations and Commerce, Economic Development, and the Senate Committees on Appropriations and Economic Development on or before December 1st. That includes a systematic evaluation of the accomplishments of the state workforce investment system. I'll pause there because is that a term of art, Commissioner? The state workforce investment system? Like, is that some kind of specific, or is that just what we're calling this entire thing?
I think it was just what we're calling
Okay,
this
right,
entire function at the time.
okay.
How do we, because we do often use the term workforce investments.
right, but you don't often use the word system.
It just came, yeah, this is the first time I've seen it read in the statute, so I was curious if there's something I'm missing, but I think it just means this entire, workforce.
Yep.
Training, education. Accomplishments of the state workforce investment system and the performance of participating agencies and institutions. The provisions of 2 VSA 20D shall not apply to the report to be made under the subdivision. Subdivision 5, coordinate public and private workforce programs to ensure that information is easily accessible to students, employees, and employers, and that all information and necessary counseling is available through one contact. Kind of why we're here again. Subdivision
Yep.
6, facilitate effective communication between the business community and public and private educational institutions. 7, notwithstanding any provision of state law to the contrary, love that phrase, to the
Yes.
extent allowed under federal law. Those are 2 very powerful phrases there.
Yeah,
Ensure that in each state and state-funded workforce education and training program, the program administrator collects and reports data and results at the individual level by social security number or an equivalent.
wow. That,
That's a federal.
but clearly kept relatively, right, I mean, that's not publicly.
The social security number is not public, but the way we track wages is through unemployment insurance.
Right, right, that's all through.
They have to, so all this is saying is if you're on the eligible training provider list and you have a number of people going through your class, you do have to capture the social security
Right.
number and you have to provide the person's name and SSN to the Department of Labor for us to fully track, because part of what we're also tracking is wages. So what were their wages going into the training program? And then 6
Yeah,
months
what are
after
they later?
completing training, what did their wages
Want to
be?
see,
Right.
make sure people are getting trained, are able to grow there.
Correct.
Oh my God.
And there's also a compliance piece there because under the registered apprenticeship program, the employer is required to have a tiered wage system.
Right.
So what you start the apprenticeship program with, what you end the program with, what you earn 6 months later, or upon successful completion of your test and receiving your certification. Those are all different points where we have to ensure that they are increasing the individual's wages as originally prescribed.
Right.
All right, and the last.
Adam's hand is up again. Is that right?
Yep.
It is, yes, thank you. So just want to flag that this is one of those issues that our data conversation was picking up on, the challenge that we have in tracking workforce development initiatives with high school students who are not providing social security numbers, and then as they move into the workforce, they become tracked through the social security. So in the future, I think we'll see states adopt ways in which to have wallets of data that are associated with the user instead of the system. So, this nicely includes or an equivalent. So for future use, we could start to adapt that as those technologies become more secure and available. But this is one of those issues that makes it really difficult to track the impact of the workforce system across the entirety of the system, not just within the participants who this speaks to. Just wanted to flag that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good flag, thanks.
Okay, and then subdivision 8, coordinate intentional outreach and connections between students graduating from Vermont's colleges and universities and employment opportunities in Vermont. And that is section 540 of 10 VSA.
Done in 2014 in response to the changes that we all require.
You comfortable with me, Mr. Chair, going through the rest? So let me just do it before we jump into each individual.
So this is your proposals for how to separate.
Yeah, so what you'll see is,
Anyone else wants water? Everybody has.
So,
We'll take a break.
we
Well,
take,
1 second.
5-minute break.
yeah, let's take, I think it's a good time to break anyway.
Kendall.
Kendall should be here shortly. It'd be good if she's with us to go through this list anyway, so.
Great.
Maybe